Okay, in this last video on the efficient portfolios, we're going to take a look at some important ideas in building the efficient frontier and picking that right combination of assets that are going to give us the best portfolio, the efficient portfolio that we've been trying to get. So let's start with some ideas here. As we combine assets in differing proportions, we can build an infinite variety of portfolios, and we've already been doing some of that. Over in the spreadsheet, we've not built an infinite variety, but in the first portfolio, the 2-asset portfolio, we built 9 different portfolios. And in the 3-asset portfolio, we tried 15 different varieties. And I've made the plots of the returns against the standard deviations down here in the lower graph. And so that's what we're talking about with these next points. We prefer portfolios with higher returns. So if returns are on this y-axis, we prefer to be higher. We prefer to go up on that. So we like to have our returns be higher. But we also prefer our portfolios to have lower risks. So we prefer to move left on the x-axis and have less risk. So those are our primary considerations. And so if we plot risk and return, another way of saying that is the mean and variance of the portfolio. So actually, the x-axis would be variance, not standard deviation. But again, of course, those are closely related. But if we've got variance across the x-axis and then y-axis is the mean, we want points that lie furthest to the northwest in a graph. So we want to be moving that direction. Now let's go back to our graph of points on the 2 and the 3-asset portfolios. In the 2-asset portfolio, I've got the mean and the variance here. And I want to have points that lie furthest to the northwest. So there's actually, let me just put in a little curve here. We want to have points that are going to be furthest to the northwest. And so we have really kind of 2 points that we would even consider in this graph, and that's the top one. We'd really just prefer, or we should only prefer those 2 points. The one at the top is the highest return, but it also has a higher risk, a higher variance than the assets slightly below it, the one right here. So depending on your risk tolerance, your preference for risk, you may choose one of those portfolios against the other. You clearly would not choose any of these other portfolios, any of these other items in the investment opportunity set, because they have either inferior returns for a given level of risk, or they have more risk for a given level of returns. So that is to say, let's look right here at these 2 points. They both have a risk measure of around 23-24%, but one of them has a 12% return and one of them has a 10% return. So clearly we would pick the one that has the 12% return. We're not going to pick the one that has a lower return for the same level of risk. That would be an inferior portfolio. And so with this particular opportunity set, we only have 2 portfolios that we would consider. Let's move down to the 3-asset portfolios that we built. And we have a little bit more variety here. Let me just trace the things that we would even consider. And that's going to be on this outer edge. So anything along those lines we might consider, those are going to be the ones that are further to the north and west. Anything on the inside would have inferior returns for a given level of risk or inferior risk for a given level of returns. So along these bounds, and it's really, actually, once the curve starts to turn in, we're not going to consider anything below that. So let me just stick another point right here. Well, anything below the point where it starts to curve back underneath, anything below basically that minimum variance point, we're not going to consider. By the way, the minimum variance point, this is an important point in these drawings, is going to be the point in this investment opportunity set that's closest to 0 on the x-axis. So this point right here would be the minimum variance portfolio out of all these choices that we have. So anything below that is automatically going to be inferior because it's going to have a lower return for a given level of risk. So our investment opportunity set is all these dots. The efficient frontier is going to be anything that's above the minimum variance portfolio and to the northwest. So our efficient frontier in this picture is going to be in this area up here. Let's go back to the PowerPoint and consider some more of these points. If we plot the return and the risk, or the mean and variance of the portfolio, we prefer to be to the northwest. And any portfolio, and this is what I just mentioned a minute ago, any portfolio that is plotted below the minimum variance portfolio, that would be the one right here, is going to be inefficient. That is to say, there's another option that has either a higher return for the same variance or a lower variance for the same return. Okay, let's move on to our next slide. If we add in the risk-free asset to the investment opportunity set that we have from combining our risky assets, then we can further improve our possible risk-return combinations. If we stick in a risk-free asset, we would have a point here where we'd have a positive return and zero risk. That's what risk-free means. And if we combine these, then I'm going to draw a capital allocation line that connects the risk-free asset to a point tangent on the efficient frontier, and that's going to provide us with our final combination of risk-return possibilities. So we're going to be investing somewhere along this line, this tangent line between the risk-free asset and this efficient frontier built by our risky assets. And so finally, our optimal risky portfolio is going to be the best combination of risky assets that we're going to add to the risk-free asset. So it's going to be that tangent point on the efficient frontier. So we've got the tangency point of the best possible capital allocation line, and that's going to mean it's the steepest, it's the tangent point, and the investment opportunity set, which is all of our portfolios of risky assets that are combined. That's what the definition of the investment opportunity set is. So we're going to be choosing different proportions of the risk-free asset and the optimal risky portfolio depending on our risk preference. So if we would like to have less risk in our portfolio, we're going to have more weight in the risk-free asset, and we're going to move towards the left and down on this capital allocation line. On the other hand, if we like more risk in our portfolio and a higher return in our portfolio, we're going to move to the right. We're going to have less of the risk-free asset and more of this optimal risky portfolio, this tangent portfolio, and we'll enjoy a higher return, but we'll also be facing higher risks in our return outcomes. And just a final note here, the final choice by the investor is going to really reflect their risk aversion, so how comfortable they are with risk, and it's also going to reflect the diversification. So they're going to be choosing the best risky portfolio based on the risk-return trade-offs of all those risky portfolios. They're going to pick that very best one. And in making this final choice by the investor, where they're taking in this optimal risky portfolio and they're combining it with the risk-free asset, we have this thing called the separation property that's mentioned in your text. So that's the main ideas of efficient diversification, and that's going to wrap up our videos for the topic.
No escape from reality. Open your eyes, look up to the skies and see. I see a little silhouette of a man. Scaramouche, Scaramouche, will you do the fandango? Thunderbolts and lightning, very, very frightening me. Galileo,